We had so much fun last week going over classic archetypes that you wanted a more in-depth analysis of each one. The master of kung fu and friendship can't leave his baby bird starving, so let's start with our most central figure. I'm author DC Ferguson, and this is the Worldbuilding Dojo. Before we get started, I wanted to give you all a quick reminder. Subscribers to my newsletter are getting a copy of Cora Blake, Arcane Agent for free. This short story is a prequel to the Dragon's Dream saga and is a great chance to get started with the series. I linked the newsletter sign up in the comments. Make sure to sign up and get your free copy. So, what's new in the world of heroes? Not a heck of a lot, right? These stories are as old as time. What might surprise you to find out is that we've only known about the entire concept of archetypes for a little over a century now, after exhaustive mythological and psychological research. That's right, the idea that all countries, races, and civilizations throughout history have had heroes' journey tales seems like a no-brainer now, but 100 years ago this was new information. Understanding and processing that information was pioneered in part by psychologist Carl Jung. While we'll definitely be going into some of his beliefs and findings, our interest in understanding what he believed is to hone and sharpen our own tales. So, what is a hero? You could make a great case that we could probably boil down the hero of a story as the one who overcomes. Now that's intentionally vague, but only because what constitutes a hero tale is pretty broad. The hero is the central figure of our story. The tale is typically about them and their adventure, and will culminate with the hero overcoming the conflict or adversity placed before them. Whether by sacrificing themselves or simply punching evil directly in the jimmy, the climax of our tale features the overcoming of the trial the tale had set before them. What does that look like? How broad can it be? Well, it can range from the massive, destructive revenge monster that is Commando, a one-man killing machine who will murder every single person that stands between him and his daughter. Or it can be solely contained, like Girl Interrupted, as a woman struggles with mental health issues and finds strength to recover and move on. As you might recall from our last video, these are battles within and battles without. For the good of our tribe or to vanquish the shadow within ourselves, these tales resonate with audiences because they speak to overcoming a threat. Quite literally, these tales rage against the dying of the light. Now that we've covered that, let's explore how. Origins of heroism in tales have a number of deviations, but usually fall into pretty common categories. The first we're going to look at is their birth. Often, the birth of the hero is somehow auspicious, either in the when, the where, or the how. For example, in Project Phoenix, Korra is born in 2058, the exact same year of the Awakening, the moment that magic returned to the world. Luke Skywalker is an orphan that unknowingly is the son of the greatest evil in the galaxy. Simba is the future king, but has been deposed by his uncle. Born under a blood moon, killing their mother with their birth, the rightful heir to an empty throne, these are all common threads of unusual birth origins. They may not be a major factor in starting the hero's journey. Cora Blake's birth year has no immediate bearing on the start of her journey, while Luke and Simba's birthright are near the center of the conflict. The early life of the hero, basically until the time before this conflict, is another shared trait among many types of heroes. It usually revolves around two extremes, either being a tightly knit member of a community or being an outcast from it. Putting on our tribal mask and going into the Wayback Machine, it's super obvious why these factors are usually in play. This is a celebration of inclusivity. Whether we're talking about the soldier that rises above to command his brothers to victory, or the outcast that comes out of nowhere to be the hero, the tale serves to remind us that a hero can be anyone, and we must love every member of our tribe. Sometimes it's a warning against shunning away the hero because they're different. Sometimes it's a celebration of our tribe's bond, but it's always about inclusivity. This is even true when the hero is, say, orphaned and left on a strange planet, or was raised in foreign lands. This is all about backstory here. Whether you spend a single chapter or the entire first act of your story here, all we're doing is fleshing out the hero. The heavy lifting comes in the next part, and oh look, there it is. At some point in your story, a tragic or alarming event takes place. that brings your hero into the story. Now, if you're a writer of the classic 3-act structure, we're going to look at the difference between a catalyst and the ski jump moment when the hero commits to the action. For that, we're going to compare and contrast two films here, the recent film Midway and From Dusk Till Dawn. Don't worry, we're spoiler free here, and I highly recommend both films for your daily recommended dose of awesome. In the opening scenes of Midway, Japanese planes attack Pearl Harbor. This event puts our pilot hero, Dick Best, into the conflict, but it is not the ski jump moment. In From Dusk Till Dawn, the entire first act is a swerve, with two criminal brothers and the family that they've taken hostage on the run to cross the border into Mexico and rendezvous at a dive bar. Basically, every event happening in the first act of this movie is setting up the real crisis. That's not to say that nothing you see here is relevant. It certainly is for character development. But it's hard to even imagine in the beginning that George Clooney's hostage-taking criminal is the hero here. Both the catalyst and the ski jump moment come exactly where you'd expect it, at the end of Act 1, when we find out that the bar is not what it appears to be. Now, despite the catalyst for Midway happening in the opening minutes, Dick Best doesn't have his ski jump moment until, again, the end of Act 1, where he's promoted to squadron leader. A catalyst is the event that brings the hero into the conflict. However, the ski jump moment that typically marks the end of Act 1 is the protagonist making a commitment to become the hero and see this conflict to the end. That's it. So the catalyst has more flexibility because it isn't necessarily the aha moment when all the pieces fall into place. This is more the event that gets the ball rolling in that direction. It's an important distinction because it affects placement of the trials. What trials? I'm glad you asked. The hero of myth is constantly being tested, whether it's the 12 labors of Hercules or Marty McFly failing to get to school on time. At multiple points in the story, we need to reassess the hero's status quo, test it, and find them on the other side different somehow. This doesn't always mean they win or succeed at their trial, just that they performed in it and were taught a lesson. These trials can also be conversational, believe it or not. Let's go back to the well for the 47th time and look at the first Matrix film. Neo's meeting with the Oracle is staged as wondrous, tense, and uncomfortable. When Neo gets there, he's told that he is not the one. It is purely conversation-driven and affirms that he has failed the trial and let down his team. The thing is about this particular conversation, it is as a direct result of the Oracle's information that Neo himself feels freed to risk his life for Morpheus later on. So we see the transformation that took place. Without the weight or burden of being sheltered by Morpheus for his grand purpose, he can put his own life on the line, which in turn makes him fulfill the prophecy anyway. As a huge Quentin Tarantino fan and a general lover of dialogue, I cannot stress enough the importance and merit of conversational trials. I use them myself in writing, and I can't imagine a well-carved-out narrative without them. Conversational trials, as opposed to action trials, reveal a wealth of information about your hero and how they see the world around them. The value here just can't be understated. Regardless, the hero meets these trials multiple times throughout the story. Win or lose, they are hot metal on the anvil, the trials pounding them with a hammer into the shape they'll be when they meet the shadow in the climax. But our hero is not alone. The hero legends will often have several components helping them along, as we discussed in our overview last episode. So we have the mentor, the ally, possibly the trickster and the shapeshifter, even sometimes the shadow. One element we did not discuss when talking about them is that the hero will often get power or assistance from some supernatural means. Now, this is broad, so let's throw up a big splashy graphic here. Arthur getting the sword from the Lady of the Lake, the ghost of Obi-Wan, Rafiki from Lion King, the Oracle in the Matrix, Captain America's super soldier serum, Peter Parker bitten by a radioactive spider, the bride waking up from a coma in Kill Bill, and Hamlet's father. But DC, these 8 things are all over the place, they don't even have anything in common. Well, guy who talks to your monitor, that's just not true. Despite the fact that we have an event, a mentor, two allies, an origin, a catalyst, another event, and a herald. This illustrates that there is always some kind of supernatural force taking place in the legend of the hero, whether it's the impossibility of the bride waking up from a gunshot wound to the head, or the chance encounter of Peter Parker getting bitten by a radioactive spider. This force is always present in our stories. Now, this is not to be confused with Deus Ex Machina. Deus Ex Machina is when supernatural forces make it so our hero wins, like the magical MacBook that can implant viruses on alien technology in Independence Day, or Anakin Skywalker accidentally firing his ship's gun and hitting the reactor of the control ship in The Phantom Menace. These are contrived, silly, coincidental, bad, and bad. The involvement of the supernatural. Why is it there? Well, it shows that fate, time, the spirit realm, or whatever god is present is on the hero's side. This is important. It's like a blessing on this glorious quest from whatever higher power you care to name. Culturally, this makes perfect sense. Spirituality, whatever the form, strikes a chord within us. Even if you don't believe in such things, forces beyond our understanding or immense chance beyond all probability is something we can latch onto and understand, and it gives gravity to our stories. Even if you don't intend or mean to include it, hero tales will often contain this component, this higher power blessing or calling on the hero to propel the story forward. The supernatural force, as you can see, can take the form of other archetypes from the hero's tale, a catalyst or an inciting event, or just part of their backstory. The point is, it's always in the mix there somewhere. We can't go forward without getting into this. It's in every story. But DC, no, guy that talks to your monitor. It's in every story. All of them. Reconciliation with the father, or coming to terms with it, is central at every hero's tale. From the super obvious, I'm a Jedi like my father before me, to the less obvious, well, we'll get into that one in a second. The point is, every hero story will eventually cross paths with the father. Is this literally the hero's father? Well, Hamlet, the Lion King, Cora Blake, Luke Skywalker? Absolutely. Neo, the Bride, Captain America, Spider-Man? Not so much. As you can see from that list, the father figure that is so central to our hero's transformation may or may not be the focal point of the story itself. It may be a trial for the hero, another step in their transformation, or it may be the shadow itself. Regardless of which one it is, your story arc will eventually come to grips with it at some point. For me, Cora Blake's father doesn't even enter into the story until book 2. However, her father figure is central to the driving force in book 1. Like I said, even when you try to avoid it, it's always there. Our father is our blueprint, the template or model for shaping who the hero is. Now, I'm speaking generally here, as this applies to both male and female heroes. It doesn't subdivide. The mother figure is a completely different role in storytelling that is so vastly different and important that I cannot stress enough this is not a boys versus girls kind of thing. That said, the father role is usually damaged from one end or the other. Repairing that divide is part of the hero's journey. Okay, so why is this part here? Well, now we're ready to start looking at the big picture. I don't want to confuse you with this reference, but I'm sure you've heard the triumvirate in Catholic faith. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. This triumvirate is not exclusive to Christianity. It actually pervades all storytelling from every corner of the world. In a broader sense, we look at it like this. The hero's journey is not blessed until they have achieved spiritual creaminess with the whole triumvirate. That is, the community, their father, and the spirit world. If they have not achieved harmony in the triumvirate, their journey is not blessed and their transformation is not complete. So, now let's talk about Neo. Neo's father doesn't get the slightest mention in the Matrix. However, his father figure in this story is Morpheus. Neo is a child when he's raised out from the pool of goo, and Morpheus teaches him the ways of the world. When Neo sees the Oracle, he has to tell Morpheus he's not the one and lets him down. He lets down this father figure, and then his father is taken from him. Saving Morpheus is the key to Neo's atonement. He's already harmonized with his peers, Trinity and Dozer being the only ones left, and he's harmonized with the spirit world by accepting from the Oracle that he is not the one. So completing this triumvirate is the final test. And then look what happens. Stranded alone in the Matrix, he battles Agent Smith and becomes the one. Well, he doesn't do so without dying first, so let's talk about that. So we were talking about Neo, so let's just start there, because his death is a pretty on-the-nose example of this. A hero's death is spiritually enriching, basically a reward for his blessed journey. As such, Neo literally dies in the Matrix only to be reborn as the One, a very tongue-in-cheek interpretation of the Oracle's not in this lifetime answer when he realized he wasn't the One. The spirit world, or the Matrix in this case, has returned him to the living with the greatest of all spiritual power. Anakin Skywalker's death in The Return of the Jedi returned him to the light, and his ghost form joins Yoda and Obi-Wan, which is a promise that even though Luke didn't die, being a happy blue Force ghost is something for him to look forward to, his own spiritual reward after death. So here, death isn't required, but the promise of what waits for him in the spirit world is implied. But DC, what about metaphorical death? Boy, guy who talks to your monitor, you are full of questions today. But it's a great question, so let's explore that with this week's Deep Cut. Oh yeah, we're back, baby. So today we're looking at the 1994 comic book turned movie classic, The Crow. Without a doubt, one of the more emotional, dark, and brilliant comic book adaptations. You should watch this movie 83 times, and then come back here if you haven't seen it. I'll wait. 83 times. Go. Anyway. Death does not actually affect the hero in this saga because our protagonist is already dead. Matter of fact, he's been dead for a year when our tale begins. The Crow, like many characters or even monsters in fantasy, is basically a wayward spirit that can't rest. He's a vengeful ghost, as the hero. It doesn't sound on the surface like this is breaking much new ground, but boy, us goth kids in the 90s ate this movie up, let me tell you. So, avenging the death of his fiancée is the crux of his drive in this story. In the end, he doesn't die because he's already dead. Having avenged the horror that fell on the happy couple, Eric Draven's spirit can finally rest, presumably able to join his wife in the afterlife and finally know peace. But uh-oh, here comes the double dip. That's right, a second deep cut to further illustrate the divergence. This time, we're talking about both the 1971 film A Clockwork Orange, and we're contrasting it with the 1962 novel it was based on. Holy monkeys, that's a lot of deep cut. Anywho, this is both a film and novel you should have also consumed 83 times by now, because we're going to be spoiling some details here of, well, basically the entire ending. Our central character, Alex, who is neither a hero nor any kind of good person, submits himself as a test subject of the Ludovico technique, a kind of brainwashing that makes him violently ill whenever he attempts to commit crimes. When fate lands him on the doorstep of one of his previous victims, he's tortured by this person until Alex finally attempts to off himself to be free of it. In a twist, he doesn't die, but the truth of what was done to him with the Ludovico technique is revealed while he's in the hospital, and the process is reversed. Now, the film ends here, where Alex appears that he might just return to being the monster he always was. However, the novel had a final chapter that was removed from all US editions of the book until 1986, which is both super weird, but also partly explains why the film ends there. In the actual ending of the book, though, Alex has the process reversed and decides for himself to leave that life of crime and cruelty behind. So, the monster within him was chained by the technique, but in his failed attempt at death, all he did was kill the impulse inside him. This is another metaphorical death, with promise that his reformed self may someday atone and be redeemed spiritually. The lesson here is death and spiritual creaminess that follows is not always the death of the hero. It can be the death of an ideal, the renouncing of the shadow inside the hero, and so on. The hero archetype is so multifaceted and the options are so vast. Even when we try to quantify these aspects of hero tales, you'll find it doesn't constrain you at all. The natural arc of these tales usually contains these elements, even when you try to subvert it. Let this understanding inform you, not be a checklist to hit up as you break down your plot. So, I did want to talk a little bit about something super personal, which I rarely do. But it's for a wonderful cause, so let me introduce you to Liana. This beautiful little lady is my girl, and one of the most important people in my life. She's a huge daddy's girl, and Liana is on the spectrum, which has its own fair share of hero trials for her to overcome. Right now, she's participating with an absolutely wonderful organization called Needs up in Boston, and they're fundraising to get her a service dog. How cool is that, right? So, if you'd like to contribute, I have a link in the fundraising page in the description in the box down below. Also, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. The link is in the comments too. And you're going to get Cora Blake, Arcane Agent, totally free. You'll get cool news about what I'm working on books and here on the channel, and it comes loaded with cool authors and promotions for fantasy and sci-fi. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe to hear about new videos, and as always, I'm DC Ferguson. Now have fun and get crafting.